So, let's start. Welcome everybody to this second session, which is entitled Rethinking Institutions. And I think that we were all chosen here around this table because we're supposed to be rethinking institutions or reimagining the way institutions should be set in order to open up and host the ideas and the creative input of the city. I work at the municipality of Athens, and I'm in charge of the civil society sector, having created a network where we are trying to map and connect and empower somehow all the activities that have appeared in the last 4 or 5 years, bottom up, in neighborhoods. So it is a little bit like what I heard this morning, reaching out to the invisible city, the city that usually municipalities don't know about, and where people do things. And what they do is an incredible source of new knowledge for municipality services that are traditionally always behind current developments. So I welcome this very interesting panel. I'm really very excited to hear this other prism that they are bringing to what we are doing very practically on a day-to-day basis in Athens. The first speaker is Leo Panitch from Canada, a professor in political science at the University of Montreal. I will ask every speaker in the panel to shorten a little bit what we were initially given to 10 to 12 minutes, so as to give the floor some time for questions at the end. Unfortunately, I'm told that we have to end this session at 7:45. So I'll be a little bit of a cop here with the time. All right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And let me thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this event, and in particular to participate in this important panel, I think, titled Institution Building, which it seems to me is the crucial question, and one that so far today has not been systematically addressed beyond the micro level, leaving hanging the question of how one moves from micro self-organization, sharing, commoning, to transforming society. In that sense, I want to say that I will be addressing the elephant in the room, or really the two elephants in the room. One of those elephants is the fact that in this remarkable upsurge of creativity in Greek society, in the face of Greece having suffered the worst of this fourth great crisis in capitalist history, it has not been worker occupations. There's been one famous one, a small one. But it has rather been the solidarity networks, the 400 and more solidarity networks, which have involved sharing food and pharmaceuticals, etc. That has been the remarkable development coming from below. One should want to ask, therefore, why is it that it hasn't been factory occupations? Why has it taken the form of the solidarity networks in the communities? And how do those differ from worker cooperatives? How do they differ from factory occupations? But secondly, the other elephant in the room, fortunately or unfortunately, the larger elephant in the room, is the fact that in this country, and in this country alone on the face of the planet, in the face of this crisis which began in 2007, has a radical left government been elected to office, entered the state. And it was not just some pretentious left government, as one may now think after what happened this summer. Syriza was a party which, when it passed its political resolution at its first Congress in 2013, the year before it won the European election in Greece, with Tsipras heading the whole European platform. 2 years before it was elected as a government, really a year and a half before, its political resolution, a 20-page resolution, concluded with 3 or 4 paragraphs which said, "We are not a party which acts as a slingshot that throws its leadership into the state and leaves it there. We know that if we enter the state, we will not be able to accomplish anything if there is not a multidimensional, diverse movement of subversion in society." That's a quote. And commit themselves to facilitating and energizing that movement of subversion, even from inside the state. So what has happened? We have been living through, in all of the opposition to global capitalism that has emerged in the last 20 years, and there's been an enormous amount of it. We have been living through, we need to define it, and we heard it all day today. We've been living through an anarchist moment. We've been engaging in politics through an anarchist zeitgeist. For good reason. The reason being the great disappointment with the mass socialist party politics of the 20th century that promised to get us out of capitalism. And that disappointment didn't emerge in 1989. It already emerged for my generation in the 1960s, when it was clear that the mass communist parties and social democratic parties had run their historic course as agents of change. And we could trace it back to things, let us say, the Moscow City Council in 1923 had a prolonged and divisive, conflictual debate over whether May Day should be celebrated, the workers' holiday, should be celebrated with a military parade in Red Square in front of the Kremlin, or whether May Day should be celebrated with cultural and artistic activities in every neighborhood of the city. And we know who won. The military parade won. And it wasn't because the people who backed that were bad people. They had been through a civil war. Capitalist powers had encircled them. They wanted to show they had strength. But what was lost was the ability to link up, to energize what we've been trying to talk about today. Similarly, the social democratic welfare state victories, they were real reforms. We're losing them now. But they were introduced and administered through the state in such a fashion that the talents and abilities that people in communities had to organize in participatory ways to provide common funeral benefits, to provide support for each other in the face of not having the welfare state. When the welfare state was introduced, people lost those capacities. The anti-globalization movement, the occupations in Buenos Aires and elsewhere in Latin America in the early part of this decade were attempts to assert what became called, as you know, we can change the world without taking power. And Occupy represented the pinnacle of that around the world. But you can't change the world without taking power. You can protest, you can occupy squares, but unless you remove the ruling classes from the levers of power, and unless you transform the institutions through which they exercise power, you can play with bitcoins until the cows come home. You can protest one after another, and the world will not change. Now, it can only change, of course, if a party like Syriza, which presented itself and saw itself genuinely as a post-Leninist, post-social democratic party that prided itself in linking up first with the student revolt. No, even before that, with the protests in Genoa, with the protests in Prague against globalization, saw itself as embedded in the solidarity movement, passed over 20% of its salary when they did elect MPs to the solidarity movement. What happened? Why was it that they got into the state and minimal things that the solidarity networks asked for, such as give us a map of the range of products produced by farmers across Greece, just give us this map, and we will go directly to those farmers and bring them to the no middleman food exchanges we have. And the Ministry of Agriculture said, we don't have that information. They didn't even hire two unemployed agricultural economists to examine this and provide the information. It isn't just, it was already visible in 2012. You could already see it. You might have expected after that breakthrough that activists in the solidarity networks would flock into Syriza, would transform the party branches from debating Plan A versus Plan B, the resolution for the next party Congress, into what can we do in our communities to energize and develop community participation, creativity, envisioning and beginning to plan out alternate modes of consuming, producing, living, right? I have 1 minute left. And one could see already that that wasn't happening. And it hasn't happened all the more after Syriza was elected, in partly because the government sees the party as a recruiting agency of honest people. How do we find honest people who we can put into the state, right, so as not to reproduce the corruption and the clientelism? It does not see the party as an organizing, creative agent of these forces, positive forces in society that we've been addressing today. But the problem doesn't only lie in the party. And I must say, the KKE isn't any better, and neither is Popular Unity in this respect. The problem doesn't only lie in the party, it lies in the community activists. Because unless the people with this kind of intention and creativity go into the agency that it will go into the state, broaden its vision and its role, so at the base to create the possibility for alternative forms of living, but also go into the state in order to change the institutions of the state from the way they are organized now as capitalist institutions. So if you abstain, those of you who are Greek here and involved in these movements, if you abstain from this, you leave it to those who have an expertise in passing resolutions for the next party Congress. Thank you.